Hi everyone, and welcome to the penultimate episode in this series of videos looking at the out-of-box build of Bronco 17-pounder, the Archer. Now, in this video, we're going to be having a look at finishing off the construction of the outside of the vehicle, and then we're going to be doing the painting of the acrylics, some pigment work, and the tracks on the lower hull. So, if you'd like to pull up a chair, let's go do some modelling. So, as you can see here, these are the final pictures of the interior, with all of the pigment work now being done. It was just a matter of wanting to put all the separate pieces that were painted and weathered individually back onto the model itself. These are the stages of the dustwork within the interior. The usual process of going from light to dark and then adding on a coat of matte varnish and finishing off with the oils to give this very patinated final look, which I was really pleased with. So now we're starting to put on the sides. Both sides, everything fitted in really well. No issues at all with the fit. It is very fragile though, lots of small pieces, so you do have to be careful. And then the centerpiece went in nicely. And this was all just test fitted because I couldn't paint the outside of the vehicle with all this in the way. So this was just a test fit to see if everything went in okay, which it did. So with the two sides and the rear left glued in place, I removed everything else and then I just masked off the interior area so that I was able to start the painting process with the Hobby Boss Aqueous acrylics. Now, there was a little bit of a gap, which was well written about, so I expected it. So I just filled that with some plastic card. And then once that was dry, that was all trimmed back nicely and sanded down, as you can see there. Right, some of the final parts then. So we had a couple of side lights. That was done with the PE, just bend that round a bit of rod, and then the clear parts are added. The fire extinguisher and the jack would put on the side with a little bit of a PE strap there, no issues at all. Beautifully detailed. Now the side lamp spotlight, that's a very fragile piece. It has stayed on, but it's very easy to knock, so be a bit careful there. As far as the tow ropes go, the instructions are a little bit misleading. On the Polish version, which I'm doing, it says to add on the tow ropes, but you don't really need to. So I left those off. And as you can see, there's some miniature parts that needed to be added onto the lamps at the front. And then using some 3mm plastic rod, I was able to put the wiring in as well. If you don't have any of that, then feel free to use stretched sprue. Now, the area holder at the back was a piece of PE, which was an absolute nightmare. This was my first attempt. Since then, I've managed to get it a lot better now, and it's looking the part. But it is a very awkward piece to do, as were the handles. There was about 30 to be done altogether. I had started at the beginning of the build, but they were getting knocked off, so I decided to finally do them now just before the painting stage. So let's have a quick look around before we add on the final paint. As you can see, we have those handles there. We have some spare wheel holders that were on-field additions done in Italy. We have the rear spare track holder with a couple of little butterfly screws there. Very fragile, but lovely detail. And moving on to the other side, there's the other spare wheel holder as well. So this is where the exhaust is going to go. And here we have some further handles that were added. The PE box for the wood blocks. That went together really well as well. And again, we have some more detailing on the front lights and more of those dreaded handles. The PE was very good on this model. Although you know you have to do it because there is no plastic alternative, there was no real issues with any of it at all. So there we are. Onto the base coat, which was using Mr. Surfacer 1000 thin down. Really pleased with the finish on that. And here is the final PE sprue As you can see, everything's been used except for a couple of pieces that were optional extras. Now for the main body, I used Tamiya Red Oxide. I'm a big fan of this. Gives you a very good rock solid finish. And then I decided to add that onto the wheels as well. Then it was just a matter of doing some detail painting. As for the camouflage pattern, the blue-grey, I did hand painted the outline and then I airbrushed the inside. There's also a black camo line on the other side, which was done in a similar fashion. And then we have some detailing on the clamps and also on the jack there, which came out really well, and also the fire extinguisher. The camo pattern was taken from the instruction booklet itself. And then we just had the starting of some colouring on the blocks, but that will be improved with the oils. And then the camouflage pattern again round to the front and the toe hooks there with some metallics. And also some metallic wear on the inside of the sprockets. Really pleased how all of the camouflage came out. It's a lot easier to do it with the airbrush than having to do all the masking. And there's that black camouflage line on that side. As for the tracks, again, using the Red Oxide Tamiya primer. And once that was laid down, I used Vallejo Burnt Umber. Now, then the silvering, well, not silvering, the rubber, dark rubber was used on the inside of the tracks to signify the wear from the tyres, and then the teeth were silvered out as well for wear. I'm really pleased with how those came out. Now, usually with the tracks, I would now put a coat of varnish on and then I'll do all the weathering, etc. But I have found with plastic tracks that it's then a real pain in the backside to get on and around the wheels because it's too stiff. So this time I decided just to leave as is and put them around with no weathering at all. Here are the wheels. I always do mine in dark rubber. The backs I don't put such a heavy coat of colour on so that you get some of the red primer coming through. The springs again came out really well. And here with the spare wheels with reference photographs, I decided to add a little bit of wear and a bit of rust. And I was really pleased with how they turned out. Again, as you can see from the back, all Vallejo colours were used. As for the pigment work, I've now actually laid down a matte varnish over the whole of the build. This is to protect it from all of the weathering process. So laying down a mixture of light colours, I then added on the pigment fixer. Using capillary action, I just allowed that to dry. And then once that had dried, I would normally then add on another layer. Let that dry, add on another layer. So this time, rather than keep doing that process to build up the colour and the look, I've decided to actually go a little bit quicker using the old Tamiya stirrer, a nice bushy brush, and then using a mixture of pigment fixer and the pigments itself, I just very gently go around and build up the areas where I want the pigment to go. And I found that this was a lot more controllable, and I've personally felt that the result was a lot better as well. So I was really pleased with how this part of the build turned out. Again, once you've done this, you can then, with some thinner, do a little bit of streaking onto the dust pigments that went onto the main body itself. Again, this is all part of the layering process. It just builds in another layer of effects. And then this is just done with the same brush and cleaned out with a bit of thinner. Just make sure that the brush isn't overly moist, because otherwise you'll just get a big mess. So clean as much of the thinner off as possible before doing this. And similarly, this time I'm using a dabbing motion on the pigments that went onto the sprocket wheels. And again, this creates a nice crusty effect to show the build-up of mud and dirt over the course of a period of time. And there we have it. So once all dried, again, if you want to add some different color, darker colors, that's entirely up to you. Because this was in Italy in the summer, I wanted to leave everything fairly dusty look. And obviously the front and the back were done as well. And if we just quickly turn it around, you can see on the other side, similar process with the pigments on that side as well. And as this is going to be a competition model, all the underside has been done as well. And here we have some close-up still so you can see the effects a bit better. Now again, this was all covered in matte varnish and allowed to dry. And then once that was done, then I started to do some of the weathering with the oils. So starting on the underside, using some raw umber, we just paint along the outside of where the plates are, as well as the nuts and the bolts. And then once that's done, just get yourself a blending brush and blend it out. It's entirely up to you how much of this you want to do yourself. Just use your imagination and sensible where you feel that the dirt and the grime would actually go on the base. And just highlighting all the bolt heads here. And then once that's done, just put some speckling effects. And then once that's been dried, then we'll go in with a wash of sepia, just to give that extra depth and darkness around the oily parts of the plates and the bolts. So after a period of time and some more blending out and some more streaking, this is the effect that you can achieve. I was really pleased with how that all turned out. So not only did I do it on the base, I did it on the two sides of the hull as well, and a little bit on the actual sprockets themselves. And again, that gives you that lovely worn effect. Now, as far as the gloss varnish goes, I add that on just to show where the oil leakage has been. Gives you that sort of wetter look effect. Here I've put on the bogies now. Now, as you can quite clearly see, there's been no weathering to these bogies. So what you need to do is to repeat the process as before, using the speckling with the mixture of pigment fixer and of the actual pigment powder itself. So again, really pleased with how that turned out. And then it's a simple process of doing the oil washes again and blending out. So with that part done, it was a matter of turning my attention to doing some oil weathering on the wheels. So first we lay down the dust layer, and then we do some more precise dust work. And then it's a matter of then building up the opacity with some more dark and light oils. All of this was covered up in my last video if you want more details on the oil paint rendering. And don't forget to put the silver rims on the wheels, because obviously these will be worn through from the teeth on the tracks. This is quite easy on this kit because the rims were quite wide. So it's just a matter of removing the paint with some alcohol and then putting on the acrylics. So once that's done, it's just a matter of adding all of the wheels. I glue on the wheels first, make sure they're all rigid. And then once that's done, then I feed through the tracks. The tracks split in a couple of places, but that was to be expected. Plastic track links were a nightmare to do. But once that was all on, I then glued all of the links fully and then added a bit of sag while it was all drying. And the final result was a good one. As you can see there, I've started to add a little bit of pigment. And what we'll do in the next episode is that we'll actually have a look at the final reveal on how the actual tank is looking all together. So in the meantime, it just leaves me to say thanks very much for popping in and having a look at my work, and I appreciate all the support from my subscribers. Happy modeling, everyone.